I wanted to do a video about stand-up paddleboarding progression and, my personal experience with starting from just learning out, just learning the sport, stepping down, and getting into lower, smaller, shorter boards, and kind of what it took and what drove me there, what inspired me, things like that. So to give you a bit of background on myself, I started surfing when I was about 15 years old. I learned on, just a old junky board with duct tape. Got my first ride and I was hooked. As I got a little older, I got a performance longboard and kind of liked that I could get more waves on it. It had more glide. I lived in Massachusetts, so I only surfed 3 to 4 months a year. I didn't go in the winter. I didn't do stuff like that. One of the things I noticed, I always struggled for a lack of waves. I thought I did great. I thought I had all these killer rides, but, I never caught more than 5 or 10 waves in a session, right? There was a lot of East Coast, in the summer, gutless waves, no push. If it did get big, I didn't have the experience to get out anyways, so it's mostly just kind of there for, until I got into my 20s. My first experience with paddleboarding and kind of my introduction was paddling out on my, my longboard, and there were some older guys out on 9 and 10 foot paddleboards, and they were just catching everything in sight, stuff I couldn't catch. They'd catch waves that didn't even break, and it just looked like a blast. They were, doing turns in whitewater, things I couldn't do. I'd just lose the wave if I tried those maneuvers. They were getting really long rides. They could see a wave coming and paddle out to it and go left or right and catch a wave, that I couldn't even get to. I just didn't have the paddling power to get over to the, some of these waves break 200 yards over. They could see them coming and get there and catch them. So I was definitely convinced that it was something I wanted to try. So my first board, the first thing I did after seeing how expensive they were is I rented one. It was cheap. It was like 20 bucks a day. I rented a 10.5 by 31 Starboard Drive. And initially I just paddled it like a prone board. I didn't see any need to stand up and paddle. The glide was amazing. I started doing the same thing they were doing. I could catch a wave. It didn't even need to break. You had all this time with that early entry into the wave to figure out go left, go right, stall, whatever you wanted to do. Once I got a little confidence and I paddled and caught all the waves I wanted, then I played around with the paddle and started getting into that as well. I kind of liked how once you're standing up you could see the waves even further away. So that was even another benefit on top of all of this. So after 3 days of renting the paddleboard, I was hooked, and I just went and bought a 10.5 Starboard Drive. It worked for me. It was good. My wave count went through the roof, right? Maybe before, on a good day, on my performance longboard, I'd catch 10 waves, right? And most of those waves would average 5 to 10 seconds. Now I was getting 50 waves, and it'd be in the same time. I'd go out for a couple hours, same time in the water. I was catching 5 times more of the waves, and my rides were going 2, 3, 4 times as long. I could catch them further out. I could ride them further in. And with that time, that extra time, that's when I really started to learn it gave you time to fade back. It gave you time to walk to the nose, walk to the tail, learn how to turn the board, experiment, play with it, right? It opened up a whole new level of surfing that I just didn't have before. So I surfed that board for a couple years. It's a great board. I decided to move down to Florida, and I moved to Central Florida, so we weren't near the beach, but we took a lot of trips over to the beaches, so we'd stay in hotels. So that kind of was my first step down. It wasn't me wanting to go smaller. It was a 10.5 board wouldn't fit in the hotel. I needed to get something like 9 foot or a little over to fit in the stairway or the elevator, get it in the room. So I decided on, I actually ended up renting and buying a Riviera Nugg. It's 9.2 by 31. It was like 150 liters. By far the best board I've ever owned. If I had one board in my quiver they would be that board. Just the way it's shaped, it can longboard. You know, you can get on the, it's like a longboard, you can get on the nose, you can cruise, then you can put it, switch it over to a 2+1 thruster, and you can get, you know, performance out of it. It's forgiving, it can ride, you know, ankle high peelers, it can ride chest high, you know, head high sets, it could do it all. It really opened my eyes to the possibilities of, you know, SUP surfing, maneuvers, things like that. So that was an amazing board, something I really, you know, stuck with. And I mean, that was my board for 2 or 3 years. I rode that exclusively. Then I decided it was time to take a step forward. I'm not so much that that board was holding me back, but I just figured I'd try another shape. So after doing some research, I found L41 made this SimSup where you could step down in size but not lose a lot of stability, because I was worried that I didn't want to get myself, you know, in over my head and just have a board I couldn't ride. So I wanted to try one, but renting one at that point was basically impossible. They hadn't made it over to the East Coast. It was more of a West Coast board. So after doing some research and things, I just custom ordered one and took the plunge. I ordered an 8.4 by 31, about 130 liter board, and took 2 months, shipped it over to me. And I mean, by far the best looking, the best built board I've ever owned. It was amazing. It had a green, yellow, blue tint to it. The tail was beautiful. The glass job was thick, sturdy. You know, everything about the board was great. No complaints. When I got it out in the waves, you know, it was fantastic. It still had good glide. It was long enough for that. It had quads in it. I mean, kind of what you need on a wide tail board. So when you went to do some turns, it was, you know, it really pivoted. It turned. It was a whole new thing from my other boards. My other boards were more like how a longboard turned. You go to the back, pop the tail up, and kind of swing the nose around. This was more of a slide. You could kick the tail out. You could really snap it. And this is where, you know, I really started to, you know, bump up my performance levels, right? So from there on out, I was able to really start, you know, pumping down the line, doing cutbacks, really slashing, like going after the lip, you know, trying to stay in that critical section of the wave. Super fast board. You'd hardly ever get stuck behind the white water, and even if you would, a couple pumps and you would be ahead of it again, going, you know, it really opened my eyes. The one thing that you did have to do on the board that took a while to learn was you had to get your foot back, all the way back to the kick pad. If you didn't, you were just fighting yourself. It wouldn't turn well. I mean, you had to have your foot all the way back when you went to do your turns. Once you figured that out, it was wild. It was a great board, you know, a great step down board to really show you what was possible. Again, I was blown away. Wow, I can do all these, you know, crazy turns and maneuvers I didn't think I could. So then something happened where, you know, my progression started to, you know, really kick off. We decided to move over to the East Coast, bought a house right on the beach in Cocoa Beach, and instead of going on trips 3 to 4 times a year, I was surfing every day. So as you can imagine, things just went way up from there. So I bought 8-foot by 30-inch wide, 120 liter performance shape. I found it on Craigslist. It was like a couple $100. I couldn't say no. And it really started to show me what you could do with a performance board where the L41 lacked. So the L41 was better on like more gutless waves. When you started to have something that really was peeling over and starting to get some shape and some curve to it, you could really pump it down the line and get your speed up and then do more of a power turn, which I wasn't used to. So the L41 with quads, I feel like when you do a turn, it's cool. You slide and it looks neat, but you don't have power behind it. You know, you don't turn with speed. It's more of a pivot with more of that drawn in nose and tail and a thruster setup. You turn and you bring that speed and power with you. And it's a whole different feeling, which is, it's cool. I like experimenting with new boards. So that was definitely a fun one. And then I bought another board I fell in love with. It was 7.4, which was very short, by 31. It was 130 liters. It was almost 5.5 inches thick, so plenty of float, but super short. It lost a lot of glide, which kind of wasn't great, but it had quads and it had that instant down the line speed. So for our gutless waves, I mean, it turned like a dream. You could, snap it, you could pump it and just make it go through anything, and it could perform on waves that were knee high or less, and you could really do some fun turns. So I love that. You could go out and do some great turns. I mean, I had that board for 2 years. I wouldn't give it up. It was great. So from there, continuing to kind of search for that performance, I liked kind of keeping a wide tail board in my quiver, one of those big fat wide boards. And then I started to get more into, also having another board that was narrow, drawn in like that kind of short board looking field. So I found an 8-foot 4-inch by 28 105-liter Lokahi on Craigslist. This was my first step down. This was like a pro board, and I was nervous. 105 liters. I'm like, I don't want to spend a lot of money on this because I don't think I'm going to be able to float it, right? I'm 180 pounds, so, I was thinking that's starting to get close. So when I stood up on it, it wasn't hard at all. I was expecting, tippy, couldn't stand on it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I fell. It was hard in chop and things like that, but it was nowhere near impossible, right? And especially riding some of the other smaller boards I'd already done, it wasn't a huge step down. I was able to do it. And within a week, I could ride it in chop and just pretty much anything. It was just, it wasn't a big deal anymore. The things about it were, pulled in nose and tail, super thin, like only a half an inch on the tail, razor thin, and that nose is pulled in. Real sharp rails, thruster, very aggressive thruster setup where the fin's like only 4 inches off the tail, super aggressive that way. So, you could pump the board just like a short board. It was pump the board, turn on a dime, all that kind of stuff. I'd say it was a little stiff, but when the waves got bigger, that's what you wanted. So, I mean, it's a go-to board in chest high and bigger waves. I mean, it just was perfect. It tracked great. It turned, just how you wanted it to go. And then I had my wide tail board for the smaller days. So, I mean, I keep that board around even today for a gun, on bigger days, like that gun shape. It can get in early, and it's got that fin set up way back so that you get the traction you need, when you really want to do a turn in a bigger wave. Then another Craigslist find. I mean, again, each board I stepped down, I thought, this is it. I'm not going to be able to ride it. I got a 8-foot by 27 95-liter. It's called a Brusurf, Brusurf. And again, a great deal on it, a couple $100 on Craigslist. And I was thinking, now I'm going sub 100 liter. It's 95 liters. It's not going to float me. It's too narrow. And it was kind of the same experience with the Lokahi. I got up on it. The nose and tail weren't as pulled in. It had like a swallowtail, so it was a little wider tail, and the nose was a little fatter. So it ended up being just as stable as the Lokahi. I had almost no step down at all, even though it was an inch narrower. The only thing I did notice is it sat a little lower in the water. I wasn't underwater, it wasn't up to my ankles or anything, but it was getting closer to that volume where you're going to start sinking it. And again, this board blew my mind. The fins were further forward. So if, on my other board, the back fin was like 4.5 inches off the tail, this one was like 6 inches off the tail. And the side fins on my other board were 14 inches. These were like 17 inches up. So it really loosened the board up and made it super fun on those smaller days. Anything up to chest high, it just really performed great. And you start getting bigger than that, and it would get a little squirrely. But I did notice that it had a center fin box you could move. If I just bumped that fin back about an inch, it tightened it back up again and made it good. And then on the smaller days, you just move it forward an inch. And it's amazing what just moving that rear center fin up and back on a thruster setup will do. It's another reason I really like having that 8-inch fin box on the back, is for those kind of adjustments you can make. So, it had the 5 fin setup. I tried the quads. I don't personally prefer quads on a small pulled in, short board like that. It takes away, you know, pumping for me, and it kills that drive or that ability to just hit the lip wherever you want. On a quad, I can when I'm on quads, I look at the spot I want to hit, and I always seem to kind of slide out by it and not get that turn. Whereas with a thruster, I can just snap and go right up and hit it. If the wave's closing out, I can pick my spot and hit it every time. And the board's a great board. It's super stable, and it's just, I love it. So, I take it out all the time still. And then for my final drop down, I decided to shape my own board for my last one. Mostly based on I couldn't find a good deal on Craigslist anymore, and I didn't want to spend $1,500 or $2,000 on a brand new board to find something that I just can't ride. So I decided to drop 10 more liters and try it. So I bought a foam blank. I shaped it 7.7 by 27. It's almost like a little under 27, 26 and 3/4 by 4 inches thick. It's 85 liters. And I shaped it, on a CAD program and got it all built and decided, that's what I'm going to try to do. And it was sort of the same thing. I got it all built. Obviously, there was no waves, but I didn't care. I took it out flat water and just said, let's see if it'll float me. And I stood up, and I mean, it's getting even closer. I can show some pictures, but I mean, my ankles were getting a little wet. It's right on that edge. I mean, I'm 180. I'm like 80 something kilograms, and this is, 1 liter floats 1 kilogram, so it's 85 liters. I'm right there. It still floats me though, and it was definitely a step down. It was more tippy, all that. But as long as you progress in little chunks like that, it always seems to be doable, right? You get, it's a little wiggly, but after a couple days on it, I feel fine, I did notice that, on this board I really can't stop paddling, but I don't have to paddle hard. I can just kind of sit out there and just leave my paddle in the water and move ahead a little bit. I'm not having to constantly paddle to keep the board up or anything like that. It's more just stability, slow, easy paddling. So I can still go out for a couple hours and not be exhausted or anything like that. I haven't gotten any great surf on it, but I surfed it this morning, in knee-high surf, and I've surfed it a few other days like that. And it catches waves just as good, if not better, than my other boards. It's still got that glide. It's not super short, 7.7. Fun. Turns on a dime. It's got that. I put the thrusters back, like on my Lokahi, where the back fin's like 5 inches and the fronts are like 15, so that's pulled back. But I've noticed I bump up that center fin about an inch on these smaller days, and it gets it done. It does the turns. It's fun. Nobody could believe I could catch waves on it when it was that small. They thought for sure I'd lose all my glide, but it's still got it. It's still fun. So, next steps, where to go from here, right? I always keep an eye on the pros, right? I was lucky enough to do, stand-up paddleboard training classes with Zane Schweitzer and Sean Pointer. And, they gave me tips, and, I've learned a lot from what I do on how to turn and things like that from those guys. But, when I see them riding those boards where you sink them down to your knees or your hips, and then you got to paddle to come back up to get on plane to even think about catching a wave, I feel like you start to lose the whole reason of getting into paddleboarding is getting that early glide and stuff. I mean, of course I want the most pulled in board I can get for the performance, but I don't want to lose all the glide and everything, or I feel like, why wouldn't you just go buy a short board and, then you get the ability to duck dive and you don't have to work to punch out through waves and all that stuff. And, why are you going to sink that? But again, I could eat my words. Who knows where I'll end up, right? I mean, obviously I want to keep pushing it because 85 liters isn't my limit. So what is your limit, right? But if I'm sinking the board and you got to keep constantly paddling hard to keep up, it's going to kill your session time, make you exhausted. I get why they do it. They do it to win contests and stuff like that. But I'm out there for fun. I don't care about, winning a contest. I want to have fun, stay out for a long time, and catch a ton of waves. So having said that, I'm definitely going to keep pushing it until I finally get a board where I just can't stand up, or I sink it and it's not fun. I mean, that's just kind of what I want to do. But I think the other thing that's good is now that I know I'm getting close, like 80 liters is pretty much it, I can make another one of those wide tail boards like I like that are right around 80 liters. So then you get that pump, that speed, and you get a little wide tail board to go with my, pulled in board. You get a short board feeling and then like that kind of wide board, quad, loose feeling board. I think it'll be, that'll be fun playing around with different things like that. So, in conclusion, I just wanted to talk about what got me from a 10.5 board all the way down, a 10.5, probably 160 liter board down to an 85 liter 7.7 by 27. So huge step down, but you can't, you take it slowly over time. I think it works out fine. It's been, 12 years of paddleboarding for me, so I didn't get here overnight. And really the most important thing at the end of the day is that you're having fun. On any one of those steps, if you go too far and you stop having fun, you're going to kind of stop surfing. You're not going to enjoy it as much. So, I've always tried to have fun the whole way down. And by no means did I go down to a next board and never go back up. I still have my bigger boards. I still go out. I have like a 9.6 Jerry Lopez, paddleboard that I love. And I'll go back to that on the small days too. You don't have to keep stepping down and killing yourself. I surf with longboarders, shortboarders, kayakers, you name it. We're out there, we're having fun, everybody's catching lots of waves. That's what it's all about. So, you just go out and have fun and ride whatever you like to ride. And, hopefully that gave you a better idea of what it takes and, a different approach to, drop down and get into smaller boards.